both faith and secular leaders and advocacy organizations to make real progress on some of the most important issues of our time. She is a leader in the fight to defeat the serious threat that Christian nationalism poses to religious freedom and the separation of church and state. Our second panelist, Reverend Erica Ferguson, is the principal of Envision Justice and the leader of the Tubman Travel Project. Envision provides support and assistance to organizations to develop programs around reproductive justice. Fighting for reproductive justice became her mission, leading her to answer the call to become an interfaith minister over 15 years ago and a public speaker on matters of reproductive rights. She also provides assistance for pregnant people to leave Texas to gain abortion care. Moderating the panel will be Reverend Dr. George Mason, President of Faith Commons. Reverend Dr. Mason is a Christian theologist and Baptist pastor in Dallas, Texas, where he served as senior pastor of the Wilshire Baptist Church from 1989 to 2022, and participates in numerous local and global ecumenical and interfaith endeavors. All right, let's go forward.
Thank you so much, Dave. And I think we should at least take a moment to thank the North Haven church community for their hospitality. Everywhere that there is a fight for justice, North Haven is on the front lines, and always a welcoming place, as you can feel even in the architecture of this place. And so thanks to this community, also to Texas Impact as well as AU, and let's jump in. So, Rachel, we saw that the film really addressed the legal matters, specifically the legal challenges that are beginning to take place. I know you were a little disappointed that the film had to kind of get out there before all of the legal challenges that you're involved in were able to be presented. So maybe you could catch us up a little bit about where things stand at this point. And I think when you do, one of the questions I'm interested in is, what remedies are we really seeking in this? So let's say we were wildly successful with these legal challenges. Is it just about accommodating individuals on a case-by-case basis, and yet these laws stand? Or are we talking about the fact that this essentially crumbles the entire reason for these laws, and they can't stand at all?
Good question. And hi, everyone. Thanks for coming out tonight. I understand there's a football game, so thanks for being. Oh, shoot. That's just classic Rachel. My father and twin brother would kill me. Anyway. So shortly after the documentary, we brought a lawsuit in Missouri. We couldn't even say Missouri by the time they even put the text up after. So we brought a lawsuit in Missouri. It ended up being on behalf of 14 clergy from 7 different religious denominations. The Episcopal bishop from St. Louis, a Methodist state legislator, a lead plaintiff who's actually on our board, Reverend Tracy Blackman from the United Church of Christ, Unitarians, Reformed Jews, a Jewish Maharat, it's called, which is an Orthodox Jewish female leader. So we brought this lawsuit, and we brought the lawsuit under the state's establishment clause, right? So quick history lesson about our federal constitution and the state constitutions that mimic them virtually in every state. Religious freedom is protected from 2 clauses that work together. Right, the free exercise clause and really the non-establishment clause, the clause that says the government can't favor one religion over any other or religion over non-religion. And it's the way those two clauses work together that makes sure that we all get religious freedom, right? Because if you just had the free exercise of religion, but if it was unbridled, then I could impose my religion on you, even through the government, right? Through being part of the majority. So, like what Marcy Hamilton was talking about in this film was bringing lawsuits under the free exercise part of the protection. And the way that the free exercise clause has worked is through the Constitution and state constitutions, but also through the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, RFRA, right? So there's a federal one and state ones. Because it was found that the federal one didn't apply to the states in a case called the City of Bern, but I'm getting too lawyerly, sorry. So that was one approach. And by the way, Rabbi Barry Silver died since this movie, so may he rest in peace. I just wanted to honor him for a moment. So that was a strategy, and it's a really interesting, provocative strategy to say, wait a minute, a lot of religious folks who are trying to harm people through their religion have been using the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, in particular against the LGBTQ community. So it's time for us to use it and to make sure that we're using it to protect folks too, and folks that just want to be able to have freedom and protect their health in our society. At Americans United, we didn't want to take that approach. And it's because, there's a debate happening, like a viable debate, but what we decided was the problem with that approach is when you win, you only protect the religious community that you've sued on behalf of, right? But when you bring a lawsuit and you say, this abortion ban, like in Missouri, is a violation of the state establishment clause, the state's obligation not to favor one narrow set of religious beliefs over any other or over non-religion, the whole abortion ban is null and void as to everyone, right? And then we also aren't giving more life to this strategy that we really saw ever since RFRA, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, became law, which is to use it to harm people rather than as it was intended for particularly religious minorities or the infidels, of every faith. So that was our approach. We actually, and I'm recognizing I'm going on and on, so I'm just going to cut myself off here, but on Friday night at 5:30, our case was just dismissed, but at the lowest level of the court, and we can talk about that opinion, and we can talk about the fact that we need to check in with the plaintiffs, but there's a likely option of appeal, and also that our lawsuit simultaneously brought a lot of hope to Missouri, where there really wasn't, where a lot of the folks said, everyone's been passing us by. Thank you for coming here. There's a lot of folk here who don't believe in these abortion bans, and thank you for bringing hope and energy, and lo and behold, there's a ballot initiative in Missouri to restore abortion rights and put it on the ballot, and we're really happy about that. So I'll pass the mic back.
So Erica, this has been about, a lot of this has been about lawsuits, but your work has also been about how to create other means of support for women and help find other ways of addressing what is becoming an increasingly troublesome situation. So can you talk a little more about how you're doing that, how you're supporting women and addressing this time that we find ourselves in?
Sure. So my work, and I've been doing this work for, almost 30 years. And I started as, and it's very open, I'm very open about it, as a young woman who had 2 abortions, and I credit those abortions with saving my life at 14 and then at 18. And as a result of that, I had people that I didn't know, couldn't tell you what their names were, helping guide me along the way and showing up to provide care and comfort and support, and that changed the path of my life. And so it was so impactful that I started doing this work as a volunteer. And a story I tell is that I was pregnant, 6 months pregnant, so very clearly pregnant for those of you that know. And I was escorting women into the clinics to receive their abortion care. I had a vest on, and at that time there were no distance laws, so the opposition, as we called them at the time, could come right up to the car and sort of harass women. And I was walking in, escorting someone, and one of the people from the opposition spit on me. And at 20, I was just a firecracker mad, and I made the commitment that no matter what, I was going to do this work for the rest of my life. Now, of course, at 20, I didn't know what I was talking about, but I did know that there was a purpose to what I was doing, and that whoever those women that helped me, they served a high purpose in my life, and they would never know. And so because of that, those series of events throughout my life, I sometimes was dragged and sometimes willingly walked into the world of reproductive health, rights, and justice, as we call it. And so I think that one of the most powerful ways we can be of service is to provide practical support. And then fast forward that to the last 3 years, and I now do that in a way that I would not have ever imagined, and that is by accompanying groups of women by plane, commercial plane, into another state. And if you had told me 4 years ago that, oh, by the way, you'll be doing something that could potentially lead to some kind of civil or criminal action, I would have said, well, that sounds about right for my brand, of course. But more importantly, after working with many people who had challenges around accessing abortion care, at midnight when SB 8 went into effect, I had a teen, and many of the teens that I worked with at the time, they just, most of my work was via text because that's the medium in which they use. And she texted me and said, how am I gonna get out of this state? I can't even figure out how to get a bus across town. And in that instant, I just said I'd help you. Now, I didn't know what I was talking about, but I knew that someone helped me. And so, in answer to your question, long-winded, never give a minister a microphone because that's just no. But I did understand that to be of support and care to each other is the price we pay for the space we occupy. And so that is, I think, the highest form of service and the highest form of duty that we all can as ordinary people is to try to help each other.
So try to help each other is, it seems, at the very heart of what religion is, isn't it? I mean, in other words, you would think, right? So, I mean, but truly, compassion, empathy, care for your neighbor, trying to understand people in their circumstances and make decisions for their well-being, not your own judgment about them, but listening and being part of their lives. This seems to be at the very heart of every religious tradition. And in fact, we know that hospitals were almost all created originally from these religious commitments of people looking to support healthcare and to care for people, especially indigent people who couldn't afford it otherwise. And yet we find ourselves now, it seems, in a contest of different visions of religion that are at play in our society. Some who are exercising, it seems, more the love of power than the power of love. And I guess what I'm wondering is, how do we have a national conversation about the meaning of these matters that isn't simply adjudicated in the courtroom or in the state houses, but allows people to have a conversation about what life is and what we do with matters like this. Where are you finding hope, and what would you say is the role of religious leaders like people in this room going forward to have those kind of conversations?
A small question, really. So yeah, there's a huge role for religious leaders to play, and just anyone who identifies as having a faith, because, and I was saying this at our smaller reception, but, and Barry Silver was saying it, Rabbi Barry in the movie, it's unfactual the way it's an assumption in our society that religious folk are for abortion bans. Because actually, and the group PRRI just did the poll, the majority of religions in this country would finish the sentence, abortion should be ... with legal most of the time. That's actually, it's almost like hard to believe because we've been so sold down the river. But it's just, I forget what it was. It was white evangelicals, maybe Seventh-day Adventists, I have to look back, actually, LDS Church, I forget. Yeah, maybe it was, Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints. That there's just a few that actually would finish the clause that abortion should be illegal, and so I think we have to take that back. I think abortion is one of the hardest issues to find shared values on. I do, and I've done a lot of that work actually professionally. I have found shared values before with the idea that we should all be for reducing the need for abortion through access to birth control, comprehensive and age-appropriate sex education. I mean, I think that is true. When it comes to abortion rights themselves, I think that the shared values are something around everyone should be able to make their own decision about their own body according to their own beliefs, right? Like that feels like it should be the shared values. I understand what it's up against, right? Like a narrative of life and death, so it's a hard one. But I think that there's something in that, and that ultimately in America, if you are proud to be an American, you have to believe in our Constitution because it's really the glue. I mean, it's what we have as like our common glue in the country. And whether it's rooted in privacy in the Constitution or it's rooted in equality, right? It's just a given that this concept that everyone should be able to make that decision for themselves.
I think that paying respect to lawyers, who I love, and I spend a lot more time with them than I ever imagined, but I'm going to take a little liberty here by saying I dare say that I just don't think that Dr. King would have said, I have a dream, but let me talk to the lawyers first. I just can't imagine, right? And so what I want to talk about is the reproductive love ethic of the future. And that isn't at the level of constitution or law or policy. In the Tubman Travel Initiative, we talk about our purpose is bigger than politics, policy, power, or personality. And the reason I say that is because I truly believe, my husband will, atheist that he is, I don't know what he's doing marrying a black woman minister, I have no idea, it's just crazy. But we say that because I don't believe there is any individual or group in the world, regardless of what their religion or sincere belief is, that doesn't crack open in the space and place where they feel listened to and seen. And so when we talk about a conversation about abortion, and when we talk about how do we do this, I actually think the conversation begins with listening. And that means listening to everyone, even the ones I don't like and don't agree. That means actually really listening for the purpose of understanding and not responding. So what I'm talking about are skills and tools that we as a country and as individuals may want to spend the rest of our lives cultivating, because that is an avenue in which we connect at a heart level with each other. It is our divine humanity, right? And of course, this is lofty and very Aquarian of me. And I'd like to say it is something that none of us should be able to do in our lifetime. We talk about Vow 2175, and that is making the sacred reproductive love ethic for the next 100 years, that we will do the work required to find those shared values. And I actually think that we are actually closer, because in the 30 years that I've been doing this work, what I actually see I have in common with my siblings that consider themselves the opposition is that we all believe in life. We all believe in love, and we all believe in freedom. Now, how we get there are many different ways. We have to figure out how to get closer to that. But those shared values are absolute and true. If I talk to someone that is in the opposition and I say, without saying what I believe abortion should be for me, when I say I believe in life, I believe in the power of love, and I believe that it's possible to do the impossible, I don't think I've ever heard anyone from the opposition disagree. And that's our starting point.
So it seems that we have a contest between the idea in this country often that it's either the individual's right to make her own decisions or some majority view, or at least group that has gained power to create laws to say what you must do, and this is encoded in the state. So it's the state or the individual, it seems. But that seems to, we seem to be missing something of a more communitarian ethic in this country that says that that all of these important decisions are really, shouldn't boil down to just what the individual or the state says, but we are part of this network of mutuality that Dr. King talked about, right? And yet what we have is all these crisis pregnancy centers are closing now, where people can go to talk with someone and actually get real information. Others of these centers are pretending to be crisis centers, which is why First Unitarian has now opened the Truth Pregnancy Center, which will tell people honestly, what their options are. I know that in Israel, although they have no constitution, there is a kind of a process by which you have to, before you can have an abortion, you have to talk to your doctor, obviously, and you also have to talk to a rabbi, a religious leader, or a social worker, or someone like that, not for the purpose of necessarily judging that you can't have an abortion, but that there is a sense of value to decision-making that's more oriented toward the community and toward everyone realizing that we all have a stake in every one of these decisions. So I'm wondering how you think about where this goes. Is it going to just be about we have to have a complete legal decision that is win-lose for either side, or can we develop a more communitarian culture around this that you think could be healthier for the country and begin to help heal us on this matter and others maybe?
I have a hard time on this one not believing that leaving it to the individual is everyone winning, because no one has to have an abortion who doesn't believe in it. So to me, like anything apart from that is not a win. it's because there are power dynamics to this. And Rev Erica, firstly, I just really appreciate what you're doing. I just want to say that, I mean, you're my hero. It's excellent, excellent work. And I think when you're pregnant, with the way sort of the power is in society, it's not always, even like if you're required to talk to a religious figure, I mean, that wouldn't work for everyone, right? There's so much shame associated with it. I mean, I think abortion bans are about really controlling women's bodies and punishing women for having sex. That's actually what I think. Right. And so, so when you're in that kind of like a vulnerable position, and when society can actually pass bans in nearly half the states that do that, right, you're not in a good position probably if you're finding yourself pregnant, especially if you're finding yourself pregnant and younger, or pregnant and Black or brown, or pregnant and you don't have a lot of money, or pregnant and a queer person, or, any sort of, you're vulnerable, and I think that, to me, the communal part is about love and trust of women, and I think we'd be stronger communities if we recognize some of the power dynamics that are at play more, and we upend them and work to trust women and empower women and pregnant people to make their own decisions. So I guess maybe that doesn't sound very like communal or common groundy. I just would never want there to be a communal requirement, of any sort, because I think that we are stronger as communities when we love and trust each other. And somehow that, to me, makes for a stronger community.
Thoughts?
I think I want to introduce a concept that we talk often in our organization, and we talk about the idea of a train. And there are many types of trains, right? There's the bullet train that's in London or Germany. There's, the train that we rode in Switzerland that seemed like it took forever to get up the mountain. It was right. So there's a lot. There's the kiddie train. And all of us are on those trains. Some of us are on the speed train, fast tracking it, and some of us are on slower trains. But we're all going the same direction. And so I have to orient myself towards that understanding, because what I talk about isn't something that I will be able to see the benefit of, right? Because I'm on a train that's a little bit further ahead than many of the reproductive justice warriors that are in the movement right now, right? But I'm talking about building the reproductive ethic of the future, which means that we are going to have to be willing to dislodge a little bit of the idea that we know what's absolutely true. And that's really difficult. And I say that because being married to a white man, who I used to say is obviously I'm sleeping with the enemy, right? That was the notion, right? And it took love to dislodge that, right? To start to peel back from, is what I've been taught and what is currently my sincerely held belief, what is true? Or is it possible that there's something else that could be at play here? And so I say that in response to Rachel as well. I can't 100% say that I believe that everyone that is in the opposition or in the dominant group, I know their intent. That now I can say I know the impact, but I can't say I know their intent. And so I have to pull back. We have to pull back and say, but are we sure that this entire group thinks this? And if there is even a shred or a moment of pause, that's the space where we can take a breath and say, maybe what I think is true and what I feel is true may not be fully true. And from that place, can I think about some of these ideas a little bit differently. And some of us have to be willing to do that. Not all of us, right? I say some of us stay on that anger train and fight that fight, right? We have to. All of us belong on our trains in our prospective seats, doing our prospective work. So there's a place for everyone. We just have to decide who's where. And so I think that for me and for the movement I'm trying to push for the future, it does mean a little bit more community. It does mean inviting those that seem to be other and those that are trying to win to the table, right? Because if we distill things down to loss or win, there's always going to be a loser. And I don't think that gets us to the future reproductive love ethic that I'm talking about.
So you have cards in the pew, and some of you may have written questions. If you want to waive them, I'll ask another question or two here, and then we'll collate those and sort through them and ask them. So it was 50 years of the anti-abortion movement building momentum by chipping away at Roe until finally it crumbled. It was political, it was cultural, it was religious, it was organizing, it was on every front. It was funded, right? So I guess what I'm wondering is, now post-Dobbs, have we learned anything about strategizing? There's obviously going big, which is, let's just go straight to the question of whether, we shouldn't have a national abortion rights bill passed by Congress and just get to it. But realistically, are there some steps? On the anti-abortion front, they did parental notification. They did, they kept moving the number of weeks back. They kept, doing all sorts of things to make it more and more difficult to have an abortion. Is it possible to do more and more things to say, if a young woman is raped, if her life is in danger, and begin to do those sorts of things on a state-by-state, if not national basis? Is there conversation going on about that kind of strategy?
Yeah, yes, I think that there is. So trying to figure out how to give a short answer because I see questions coming up. One of the things that we've learned from our opponents is that they normalized radical ideas by sticking with them over time, and their donors stuck with them. So, the idea that public funds should be for private religious schools, right, is now like, by the time we hit this Carson v. Macon case a couple of terms ago in the Supreme Court, the court said that it was religious discrimination not to fund private religious schools with public funds. And the group that brought that case had brought it twice before in the 90s and 2000s, but they stuck with it, their donors stuck with it, and they shifted the mentality. And I think, it's true that for a lot of my lifetime, the anti-abortion crowd were winning the battle of reasonableness, with who decides, until they overreached dramatically and started killing abortion providers and demonstrating with fetuses in jars. And then they stopped winning the battle of reasonableness. And I would say that we're aided today by the overreach of religious extremists. And that's why we're seeing a backlash in the country in the form of these ballot initiatives. I mean, women are dying, right, as we predicted, and it's happening. And it's happening here, as you all know. And I think the more we see this overreach as well, that will be wind in our sails. But everyone has got to, like, we brought this lawsuit saying that abortion bans violate church-state separation, and that's not intuitive for a lot of folks today, So we're like at square one, in this moment. And so we have to normalize these ideas, and that takes time.
I think I'll out myself and have probably what is an unpopular stance, but I'm okay with being unpopular. I think that the opposition played the long game and they played it well. And that's what happened. And our side didn't. And the reason I say that is so that we can squarely look at what we did badly or poorly, right? Not whether we're righteous, but where did we misstep? And for those that are sports fans in the room, sorry.
What's the score in the football game,
Right.
by the way?
On Mondays after any game, basketball, football, whatever, what a team does is they sit down and they review the film. They look at why they lost, where the mistakes were, and why the other team won. They don't typically move in a way of blaming the other team that they lost. They look at what they did wrong, they study that, and then they harvest those things and embed them into their work. Our movement, and I feel qualified since I've been working in it for 30 some odd years, our movement isn't yet ready to do that. And I think we'll grow into understanding that. We have some work to do. We have some self-reflection to do. We have to ask ourselves within the work, are we doing things in the right direction? Not whether we are right, but are we doing things in a way that gets us closer to a world that works for everyone, if that's what we want? So that there's something that we have to look at. There's a couple of things that I think we have to look at.
Great, thank you. Well, there are a lot of questions, and a number of them are similar. But let's go to the fact that we're sitting in the state of Texas. The film itself didn't really address what was going on in Texas directly, but people are eager to know whether some of these efforts in other states have coalitions that are building, cases that are being brought, things of that nature here in Texas, because we can't wait, is what a lot of people are saying, and there's a need to address this for the sake of justice for women in Texas.
Get up here, Brian. Come on up. Seriously. Brian Silva is our VP for Outreach, and he's been actually creating one of these coalitions and communities in Missouri. You want to talk about it for a minute? Meet Brian Silva with Americans United.
Well, thank you. Brian Silva, he, him pronouns, and the coalition that we're working on most closely is in the state of Missouri, where we have about 50 to 60 community organizations and congregations that are collectively working to support the lawsuit challenging Missouri's total ban on abortion from a religious freedom perspective. And a lot of the work that went into that and around the lawsuit is changing the vocabulary that people use to talk about reproductive rights and abortion as health care. Most people, as Rachel said, assume that religious equals anti-abortion, and as we know, that is completely opposite. But what also was something that people didn't think about was that abortion bans themselves being an imposition of someone's religion on somebody else. A lot of it was like taking away my freedom and my right to make my own personal choice. But the deeper part of that was your right was being taken away because somebody else's religious belief was being imposed on you. And so now folks talk about abortion in and of itself and access to it as a religious freedom issue. Being able to access abortion allows you to make the choices based on your beliefs, whether it's based in religion or humanism or, just whatever. And that, in and of itself is fundamental to who we are as a country. So That's the type of work that we're doing, is changing the vocabulary and the way that people talk about this issue and other issues, trans rights and others where it is another religious, narrow religious belief being imposed on others. So thank you.
Nicely done. Brian Silva.
Okay, so Americans United is not merely a religious organization. You do work with atheists and agnostics as well, and with all religions, not just Christians, Jews, and Muslims. Some of the questions did have to do with that very point, and that is, do you represent a broad coalition of religious groups? And one of the questions had to do with whether some of the Eastern religions, Hinduism and the like, can you talk about your religious and non-religious coalition?
Yeah. We have a vast, beautiful mosaic of religions and non-religious folk who work together every day. And in fact, earlier we had a little gathering in a room off of this chapel, and I asked folks to raise their hand. Who here identifies as having a religion? And about half raised their hand. Who here identifies as non-religious? And about half raised their hands. And that's what we find when we sort of travel or run our own Summit for Religious Freedom, which next year will be, remember, Brian, April 8th in Washington, D.C. It's always bringing together, about half religious, half non-religious. And of the religious, it is everyone. I mean, we run the Coalition Against Religious Discrimination, and it has the vast majority of non-Abrahamic, Abrahamic faiths, civil rights groups, secular atheist groups. It's really something to behold. And one of the things that I love the most about our group is the way it unites folks during very divided times, which is exactly what I think we'd all agree we need more of. And when you're standing for a freedom, like religious freedom, you really can find shared values more easily. It's pretty cool. So please join us if you haven't at au.org, and we'll keep you posted about how to do that in your community.
Thank you. So one of the questions was that if both Jews and Muslims support abortion rights, where in Scripture do Christians disagree? I guess that one's to me. That's you. So I think first of all we need to recognize that when Jews talk about Scripture and Christians talk about Scripture, we don't necessarily mean exactly the same thing. And I don't just mean because there are two halves to the Bible. What I mean by that is Jews, and actually Jews and Muslims both have religious law that is a way of their reasoning, and it is rooted in decisions over time that wrestle with Scripture, and the community and its conversation about how to put into practice things that are life-giving for the community. This is how they order their lives. Christians, not so much, right? So Christians typically say, here's what the Bible says, and we do that. Well, we actually have conversations over time about this, but we don't really make it a matter of valuing that tradition and the conversations. We tend to leapfrog back to the book and then pick verses that justify our positions. And what I would say is we are fairly selective about that regardless of where you are on the continuum of liberal to conservative. And so, for example, most Christians who are anti-abortion do not read the passage in Exodus where there is a discussion about the value of the loss of a life and whether it was intentional or not, and how to make judgments about that, and how that has a sense. The differences between the loss of a pregnancy and the loss of an already born life. And, so there is a conversation about relative value, in other words. But we don't want to reason about those things. Instead, we tend to go to the more poetic passages, like in Jeremiah, where before you were born, I knew you, and in Psalm 139, where I was formed in the innermost parts, and God shaped me and formed me in my mother's womb. These are poetic passages that do not have to do, in my judgment, literally with God was doing all of this in a biological sense, but rather it speaks more about the sense of purpose, fullness of life, of the sense that I matter, and that God has been superintending in my life and giving me a sense of reason and purpose for being, which is what religion is largely about, is to find meaning. But the person who asked the question said, where in the New Testament? Yeah, not so much. No passages there. And so what we're dealing with is a struggle in the religious Christian community, which is really about the same kind of thing that Jews and Muslims do, and that is interpreting the scripture in context and trying to apply it in a way that makes sense for us. And we simply need to become more self-conscious about what we're actually doing, and that we are interpreting. We are not simply reading what God wrote and then doing and then obeying it. We're wrestling with it, even as every Christian has across time. So, any thoughts from either side of me on that? Okay, all right. So, considering our current Supreme Court makeup, what chance do we have? On the abortion matter, for one, but I mean, even preserving church-state separation. What hopefulness do you see, given that we have now an extraordinary infiltration in our judicial system of people who have been trained by the Heritage Foundation and by conservative Christian legal groups, and who have been promoted through the system. And now we see that we have lawsuits that are being brought where they are picking where to file these suits based upon who the judge is. And so it gets adjudicated that. Are we going to be in that situation now where we're going to have to evaluate the partisan politics of every judge and then file lawsuits depending upon our point of view?
The courts are very troublesome right now. They just are. I mean, the Supreme Court has been captured. It has been captured primarily by Leonard Leo, who, to the tune of millions and millions of dollars for many years, has been quite effective at putting people on the court who are extremists, and it's reaping real rewards. But there is hope, and one of the hopes is what we can do in the states, and I think there's a lot that we can be doing in the states. That's hope number one. So with the ballot initiatives that we're seeing, those are very hopeful, and we're winning them. So that's number one, right? I think that's really important. Number two, we have to play the long game. And we are playing the long game. Know that we're playing the long game and be part of it. So for example, at Americans United, we run something called the Legal Academy, which is countering what the Federalist Society has been doing for 40 years. Well, we founded our own a couple of years ago, and we're bringing together the summer legal interns from the top impact litigation groups, like top national nonprofit impact litigation groups across the board, so that they can learn strategy, philosophy, and network with each other and be networked to power. And how did I think of that? When we were writing our report about Amy Coney Barrett, and we saw that she had taught 5 times at one of these on the other side. So we're doing it. It's an investment in the future. By 2020, and I think I said this wrong, wait, by 2026, we'll have over 800 students already that have gone through the program, that are part of the network, that are young lawyers, right, who are ready to be put on the bench, to infiltrate academia, to run nonprofits, et cetera. So I think we absolutely also need to play the long game. I'll stop there.
Thank you. I've looked at all the questions, and I think we've touched generally upon what you've been interested in asking, and some of the nuances in them. Maybe you can find us afterward, and we can continue the conversation. Erica, a final word from you?
Sure. I think I'd like to talk about what hope do we have. And that's easy for me, because I know that as long as we stay in our humanity, there's hope, right? There will be sacrifice, right? There's no justice movement that has not had sacrifice. We will make it sacred. Where do I find hope? I find hope in the 5 children that my husband and I share, who all now date interracially. Would have not happened. History teaches us that when our backs are against the wall, that is when we find the ability to risk it all, right? And so for me personally, we all know how the game is played. We all end, right? I hope I'm not spoiler alert, but that's what happens, right? And some of us are on the 6 p.m. flight out of here, and some of us are on this 7 a.m. flight. If my life ends in pursuit of the love ethic, then it will be a life worth lived. And so I want to teach my grandchildren that don't even exist yet that. And that's where the hope is, right? This movement is not for me. I've already benefited. I've already benefited from the work that many have already done. The work that we do now is for those we will never know and never meet. And if we think that way, then hope naturally arises from understanding that it is not about us anymore. It's about those that will come after us. And that is where the hope lies, I think.
Thank you very much. So as we conclude, I'll give the mic back to Dave in a moment, but I hope that you will recognize that the co-sponsors of this event, Texas Impact, is a tremendous organization that helps to organize politically, to change policy for the better in Texas. And I hope that you'll go to their website, you'll become involved and engaged with them, faithcommons.org as well, and you can see what we're up to, subscribe to our newsletter, and certainly Envision Justice and also AU. Look into these organizations, because engaging at whatever point your passion is necessary, but you've already done so by coming tonight, and we thank you so much.
We do the quickest chant together because it's so fun to hear your voices. So what gives me hope are your voice. Like, here we are. We've showed up. We've skipped basketball to all be here. And so, but no, really, so like, let's hear our voices. So we're going to do 2 little chants, one of the things I like to do with you all. So one of you may have gone to demonstrations, but you may not be the demonstration going type. That's cool. We're all in this room together, and this is what democracy looks like, right? So one of the things that we chant at those is someone says, "Show me what democracy looks like." And then the crowd chants, "Show me what democracy looks like." Show me what democracy looks like. Very beautiful. Thank you all.
All right. All right, thank you very much. Let's thank our panelist and moderator one more time. Okay. All right.
Hindu nationalism in India, we can take Christian nationalism here also. So
All right. Okay, so Let them go. All right, thank you all.